There are people who argue, raise your voice, hit the table, lose control, and you know where is stepping. But there is a different type of person. She doesn't argue, she doesn't scream. She smiles, takes a deep breath, seems mature. And yet, after 5 minutes with her, you feel as if you have diminished. It's not a fight, it's erosion. You've experienced this, and if you did, it may have taken you days to understand what happened. You enter a conversation thinking it's simple, a request, a limit, a question. Leave with a heavy head, with the feeling that he said too much, that it was unfair, that exaggerated. And the strangest thing is that if someone asks you, "What did she do?" you freeze, because there was no clear attack. Just slow, almost elegant wear. Notice one thing, these people rarely present themselves as bad. On the contrary, they tend to appear calm, rational, adults. And that's where the danger lies. The mask theirs is not anger, it's balance. A balance that puts you in an unstable place. Maybe you're thinking, okay, but that's just someone who's difficult. But there is a crucial difference between someone who is difficult and someone who uses conversation as a tool for domain. An ordinary person argues to resolve it. This profile discusses to move you through, inside. To change your sense of reality, your guilt, your value. And here, between us, if you've ever felt alone trying to explain this, you're not alone. Many people who follow this channel know that feeling of leaving a room and doubt yourself. We are not here to entertain you with labels. We are here to look at the human mind without makeup. Now, pay attention to this detail. If you always end up apologizing for things, if you didn't, perhaps the conversation has already started to be manipulated, because it's not a discussion, it's a process. Sometimes it starts with, calm down, then turns into, you're confusing, and ends in a silence that forces you to fill the void. You try to be fair. You try to explain better. And without realizing it, you are defending yourself from something that no one saw. If you're listening to this with your chest tight, breathe. You are part of a group that learns to name the invisible. And when you name it, you regain strength, boundaries, and clarity again. And throughout this video, you will understand how this wear works, why it is so effective, and how to recognize the exact moment when you are being drained. If this touch a memory of yours, keep that memory. Then come back here and tell me comments. What was the phrase that made you feel smaller, even without seeming aggressive? There's a reason certain conversations feel like a maze. You say A, the person answers B, and suddenly you're arguing C. And when you try to get back to the point initial, she acts like you're pushing too hard. If you recognize this, you pay attention. This deviation is not an accident, it is technical. Social predators don't need to win by shouting. They win in tiredness. The objective is control the pace, the agenda, and your energy until you begin to exchange clarity for peace. T. Conversation becomes a tilted table. Everything slides to their side, and you don't even notice when it started to slip. One of the most common tricks is ambiguity. They speak in a way that allows two interpretations. If you agree, they take the version you favor. If you disagree, they swear you got it wrong. This seems small, but it adds up like drops in the same place. And then comes the next move, the subtle inversion. You point out a behavior, and the answer is a question about yourself. Why does this bother you so much? Why are you so sensitive? Suddenly the topic stops being what happened and become what you are. This is where cognitive wear and tear happens. Your brain starts working overtime, remembering details, justify intention, choose perfect words, predict reactions. As long as you try to be fair, the other person saves energy. She doesn't prove anything. She just push. And each push comes with a micro disqualification. A sideways smile, a you always make drama, a you are confused. It doesn't hurt like a direct insult. It hurts as doubt. Now, a disturbing fact. Profiles with psychopathic traits tend to prefer cold control to emotional explosions, because explosion exposes and control disguises. This calm is not peace. Sometimes it's calculation. If you're thinking, but she seems so polite, I understand. Many people here already. She felt guilty for distrusting someone so correct. And that's why manipulation. It works. She dresses like maturity, so when you try to set limits, you become the aggressive. When you ask for clarity, you become the difficult one. And if you don't have an audience that see this, you start to shut up. Notice your body when these conversations happen. Tightness in chest, throat breaking, hot head. This is your alert system trying to warn you that the game is not on the subject. It's about position. And if you've ever felt this, you are not alone here. We learn together, name together, and protect together. And you know what makes it worse? The more you explain, the more ammunition you deliver. They collect your words to cut later. A sentence becomes proof of contradiction. An outburst becomes instability. A request becomes control. Do you notice the trap? The dialogue becomes a file. So, let me ask you very directly. Who comes out of these conversations more whole? You or her? So have you ever noticed this pattern? Comment, I saw it, and say what the situation was. Your story helps other people here waking up. And if you want to go deep, stay with me until the end, because next part shows how this scales. There is a specific moment when the conversation changes nature. It's not when someone raises their voice. That's when your mind starts to get tired. And this detail is essential, because the real battlefield here isn't reason, it's mental energy. When you enter into a normal conversation, there is a goal: to understand, resolve, align. Even when there is tension, there is a line of logic. But when you talk to someone that uses psychological wear, this line begins to disappear. You talk about a behavior. The person responds with context. You go back to the behavior. It brings up an old episode. Suddenly you are discussing 3 different topics at the same time. And then something curious happens. You start trying to organize the conversation yourself. You remember dates. You reconstruct lines. You try to prove that you are not distorting anything. Meanwhile, the other person just watches your effort, because each attempt at explanation requires more energy than the last. This is the point that almost no one realizes. The most effective manipulation is not the one that wins arguments. It's the one that makes the other person stop arguing. And here appears one of the quietest tools in this process, the circular question. It works like this. You raise a simple problem. Something like, I felt disrespected when you did that. The answer seems reasonable. But why did you interpret it that way? You explain. The person then asks, but are you sure that's exactly what happened? You try to remember. Then comes another. Wasn't you already irritated before? Do you notice the movement? Every question seems legitimate. None seem aggressive. But altogether they create a spiral of doubt. Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever walked away from a conversation trying to remember if it really was your fault? Maybe you were silent afterwards. Maybe I left thinking too much. Maybe you spent hours reconstructing the conversation in your head. And the most disturbing thing is that the more you think, the less certain you are. This doesn't happen because you are weak. It happens because the human brain has processing limits. When a conversation requires constant analysis, constant defense, and reconstruction constant, the brain goes into cognitive fatigue. And when fatigue sets in, something changes inside you. You stop looking for truth. You begin to seek rest. And at that moment, whoever controls the pace of the conversation controls the emotional outcome. If you've experienced this, you're not the only one here. Many people who follow this channel have already described exactly this feeling, leaving conversation feeling smaller, unable to pinpoint exactly where he was attacked. This happens because there was no direct attack. There was wear and tear, small distortions, small inversions, small doubts planted. Nothing big enough to look like abuse, but enough to undermine your certainty. And when certainty wears off, something inside the person changes. She starts talking less, question less, confront less. Not because it solved the problem, but because the mental cost of talking has become too high. And it is exactly at this point that the silent control starts to work. No screaming, no threats, no scandal, just tired. And maybe as you listen to this now, a memory is popping into your head, a specific conversation, a specific person. If this happened to you, keep that memory for a moment. Because in the next part, we're going to talk about something even more disturbing. What happens when, in addition to tiring you out, that person still manages to seem perfectly reasonable for everyone around? This is where the story gets lonelier. Because, to anyone who sees it from the outside, she looks like the person most controlled in the room. She speaks quietly. Wait for you to finish. Use beautiful words. And when you change a little, you don't even need to attack. She just raises her eyebrow. Like who says, look at the level of this. You feel ashamed before you even understand why. If you've ever tried to tell someone what's going on, you might have heard, but she is so calm. This phrase hurts because it isolates you, and isolation is fuel for this type of people. When no one sees the wear and tear, you start to think the problem. It's your way, your sensitivity, your memory aurea. What keeps the mask standing is its aesthetic coherence. The posture is always the same: civility, logic, serenity. But behind this serenity there is a pattern. It never fully commits to one version. She suggests. She insinuates. She leaves you complete the meaning, and then uses the meaning you completed against you. Now change the camera. Imagine you watching this conversation as if it were another person. You would see someone calm being provoked by someone confused. You would see patience on one side and emotion on the other. And that's why so many victims become villains. For from the outside looking in, you look like the problem. Breathe and understand the mechanism. The social mask is not just appearance, is a weapon reputation. It sets the stage so that when you react, the reaction feels disproportionate. It's a context trap. The content may be cruel, but the packaging is impeccable. And there's an even colder detail. These people study what works in public. They know when to smile, when to pause, when to use a neutral, adult-sounding phrase. Let's talk calmly. It looks like an invitation. Sometimes it's handcuffs. If this is sparking something in you, you are part of a group that is learning to see patterns that were previously invisible. Here, we don't need proof. Cinematographic images to validate what the body feels. We learn to trust the signal, not only at the show. Notice how you look afterwards. Tired, guilty, afraid to speak. And notice how she remains. Clean, stable, almost admirable. This contrast is the great fraud. The mask does not serve to hide it from you. It serves to hide from others. And when others don't see it, you start to negotiate with yourself. Maybe I should swallow. It is at this point that wear and tear becomes habit, and habit becomes silence. If you are listening to this in secret as if testing your own sanity, I want you to notice. Confusion is part of the method. It's not drama. It is not weakness. It's pressure constant. If you want, write just one word here. Mask. Just so you remember that saw. And if anyone doubts, you don't need to explain yourself. Now that you've seen the mask and the maze, you can see the method. It's not impulsive. It's not a way. It's a sequence. First, the person gets confused. It changes terms, changes the focus, mixes intention with fact. You try to keep up because you want to be fair. Then she gets tired. She lengthens the conversation, repeats questions, asks for examples, asks for more examples, asks for proof of feelings. You begin to explain as if you were in a court of law, not in a relationship. When you are already tired, the inversion comes. What was about what she did becomes about what she did, who you are. You're always attacking. You want to control everything. You misinterpret. It's subtle, but it's a push to a dangerous place, the place where you need to defend yourself of your own personality. At this point, guilt becomes a tool. You think, maybe I really exaggerated. Maybe I'm difficult. And when you start to doubt, it reaps what you planted. The fourth step is to empty your resistance. The person doesn't need to totally convince you. It just needs to tire you until you choose silence. She uses long pauses, glances neutral, a polite tone that makes any reaction from you seem ugly. And if you try to insist, she sighs, as if she were dealing with a child. You feel ashamed. And shame? It's a padlock inside. This is where things get scary. Because from the outside, it looks like civilized conversation. Inside, it's a slow robbery. It's psychological warfare, without fuss. Notice the result. You start measuring words, rehearsing messages, avoiding themes, to apologize in advance. You adapt to the person like someone learning to walk on a floor full of glass. And she notices. Cold profiles often test limits like who tests a lock. If the door gives even a millimeter, they come back tomorrow and force it more. Maybe you're remembering a classic phrase, "I'm just trying to understand." It looks innocent, but, repeated at the right time, it becomes a network, because understanding becomes infinite demand. And you, to prove that you are a good person, stay there, trapped, explaining what obvious. If this happens to you, I want you to notice a simple difference. Healthy people want clarity. Manipulative people want wear and tear. One wants a solution. The other wants you lose energy, self-esteem, and voice. And if you've ever felt like your conversations have turned into unpaid work, you are part of a community that is learning to get out of this cycle. Tell me one thing, looking at your own life. Which stage gets you the most? The confusion, the tiredness, guilt, or shame? Write in the comments however you can. Your answer. It could be the mirror someone needed today. And if you know someone who lives apologizing after talking to a too calm person, share this video with her. Sometimes the first step is to name the method. The time she says, "Let's let it go," watch who wins with spring. If you want to learn to recognize the breaking point, stay with me. The next part is where becomes doubt. There comes a point where you are no longer arguing with the person. You are arguing with your own head. You remember phrases, try to understand intentions, redo the scene like it's a bad movie that doesn't end. And the more you think, the more confused. Stay. This is no coincidence. This is the stage where wear and tear becomes doubt. The trick here is simple and cruel. If I make you doubt yourself, I don't need it anymore. Attack you. You attack yourself for me. You start to watch yourself. Did I say it in a way aggressive? Did I get it wrong? Am I exaggerating? And suddenly, the conversation turns into an audit of your personality. Pay attention to your body because it tends to perceive it before your mind does. Heart accelerates. Shoulders stiffen. The throat closes. You feel small, like you're asking permission to exist. And then comes the quietest blow. The person offers a version alternative facts with a tone of calm certainty. It wasn't like that. You always interpret it that way. I didn't even say that. When you try to steady the ground, it turns to sand. This has a name. Progressive emotional gaslighting. It's not a fake show. It's a drip. A sentence here, another there, until your brain stops trusting its self-memory. And here comes a scientific detail that almost no one tells you. When we are exhausted, the brain saves energy by accepting the explanation that seems more coherent at that moment, even if it is false. Fatigue not only weakens argument, he weakens perception. If you're recognizing yourself in this now, stay with me. You are not weak. Are you? Reacting to an environment where every word costs. And you are part of a place where a lot we've already gotten stuck, trying to be right with someone who doesn't play fair. Here we learn together, without shame and without rushing. Now a reset. What if your doubt is not a sign of guilt, but a sign of manipulation? Think in this, because the goal is not to convince you. It's tiring you out until you give up control. If a conversation always leaves you in a state of testing, you are not in dialogue. You is under interrogation, and interrogation is not a relationship. If this idea made sense, comment here what you usually say to calm down later of these conversations. This helps us to recognize ourselves. And please don't ignore your tiredness. He is information. He is the alarm. In the next part, you will see the moment when you start to get easier. And that is exactly when the person thinks they have won. If you're listening to this and thinking about someone specific, don't judge yourself. Almost all world here has already taken a long time to connect the dots. The mask works because it looks like be careful. But be careful it doesn't empty you. If you want, save this video to review when you are confused. He can give you back the axle. And tell me, what was the doubt that arose? There's a moment when you realize you're not trying to understand anyone. You is trying to survive the conversation. That's when you notice that the subject changes whenever you get closer to the sensitive spot. You bring the fact, she brings the tone. You ask for clarity, it asks for calm. You ask for responsibility, she asks for time. And you, who came in to resolve, become someone who begs not to be misunderstood. Notice the pattern. When you talk about something concrete, she responds with something abstract. When you ask for an example, she gives you a feeling back. When you ask why what, she gives you a you know. This is not communication, it's fog. And fog works for one thing, making you walk slowly, afraid of missing your step. Now a dry cut. What if the objective was never to reach a conclusion? And if the conversation, was it designed to last until you get tired? At that point, the penny drops. You start to see the emotional control of the environment. It's not about being right. It's about who defines the climate, who decides when it ends, who chooses who leaves looking unbalanced. And their silence is calculated. When you are silent, you try to think. When they are silent, they make them talk. You fill in, justify, offer alternatives, reveal weaknesses, and each fragility becomes a button. You realize that there is a map of you in the hand of someone who doesn't feel guilty. If this is hitting you hard, look at your history. How many times have you changed your mind just for the conversation to stop? How many times have you kept quiet so as not to become the annoying one? You don't. You are alone in this. Many people here have learned to confuse peace with surrender. And we is here, together, to separate the two things. The moment of seeing is usually simple. You repeat a limit. The person does not respond to the limit, responds to your right to have limits. You say, I don't like it. She says, so that's how you are. Ready. The mask drops for a second, and that second one is gold. It's there that you understand. She doesn't want dialogue. She wants access. If you've lived this second, I want your opinion. Do you prefer to cut contact, reduce, access, or face with clarity? Write in the comments. Not to create a fight, but to our community exchanges real, human, possible strategies. And remember, it's not you who needs to learn to argue better. It's you who needs to stop deliver energy where there is no reciprocity. In the next part, I will leave a warning which almost no one does because it is uncomfortable. But it can save you from years of where. If someone already realized it too late, don't blame yourself. The important thing is to recognize that and choose what you protect, mind or their mask. The warning is simple, but it bothers you because it changes the way you see people good. The danger does not always reside in those who explode. Sometimes lives in those who never raises his voice, and yet he makes you smaller every time he talks to you. And if you are thinking about someone now, it's no coincidence. Your body usually recognizes it before its logic. Healthy people can make mistakes, regret, adjust. Social predators don't adjust. They calibrate. They observe what hurts you, what moves you, what makes you apologize, and they start using this as a script. The problem isn't bad conversation. It's a pattern repeated with the same result. You empty yourself and the person becomes safer, cleaner, more right. And here's a truth that many people avoid saying. You won't explain this to someone like that. Explanation becomes material. Your pain becomes an argument against you. Yours, attempting to be understanding, turns into an open door. So instead of searching for the perfect phrase, look for the signal. After talking to this person, are you clearer or more confused? More whole or smaller? Because maybe you've never lost an argument. Maybe you've been worn out until you stop fighting. And if that gives you a lump in your throat, I understand. Many people here experienced the same sequence. First doubt, then adaptation, then silence. And when you realize it, you're choosing words like someone stepping on minefield. That's not a relationship. This is conditioning. Now, one last reset. What if some conversations are already manipulated? No, because you are weak, but because someone already came in with a ready-made strategy, and you came in with, good faith. This difference is brutal. So let me ask you something carefully, almost like a commitment to you. Same. Next time you feel tiredness coming on, don't force another explanation. Observe. Make a mental note. Notice the pattern. Fatigue is the alarm. Confusion is the trail. If this video helped you name what you felt without being able to explain, comment one sentence. It wasn't an argument. It helps the algorithm, yes, but mostly it helps other people here realizing that they are not alone. And I want you to respond also, honestly. What was the clearest sign that the conversation wasn't fair? Your answer can open the eyes of someone who still thinks they are going crazy. And if you know someone who keeps apologizing after talking to someone too calm, shares this video with her. Not to create war, to create consciousness. Here we don't look for easy comfort. We investigate what's behind the masks. And, when you see it, you don't go back to sleep the same way. Sign up so you don't miss the next dives, because there are a lot of polite people, too many suffering in silence for not knowing how to name what they are experiencing. And in the end, the point is this. It's not about winning a conversation. It's about not letting your mind become occupied territory.